The Forsaken Colony, the plea that fell on deaf ears, the Galactic Union Council. Chamber floated in a void between star systems, a massive structure built from crystallized starlight and metals. Unknown to most species, inside, representatives from 47 civilizations sat in their designated zones, each environment carefully controlled for their specific biological needs. The chamber had witnessed countless negotiations over its 600-year existence, but today's session would test the very foundation of what the Union claimed to represent. Ambassador Telleris stood at the center platform, his forearms trembling despite his efforts to appear composed. He was Velna, a species known throughout the galaxy for their agricultural innovations and peaceful nature. His people had transformed barren worlds into gardens, shared their crop technologies freely, and never once raised weapons against another species. Now, as he looked into the eyes of the assembled representatives, he saw nothing but cold calculations staring back at him. Honored members of the Galactic Union, Taurus began, his voice carrying the melodic tones natural to his species. For 18 planetary rotations, the Crush Swarm has been consuming my world. They arrived without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. Our population of 9 million has been reduced to 3 million. Our cities burn. Our children hide in underground shelters, listening to the screams above. Crash were not a species in the traditional sense. They were a biological plague, a swarm of insect creatures that consumed everything organic in their path. No one knew where they originated, but every few decades they would emerge from deep space, devastate a system, then vanish again into the dark. They had no language, no technology beyond their own biological adaptations, and no interest in anything except feeding. The Althuran representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, spoke first. The Althuran collective sympathizes with your situation, Ambassador Terroris. However, our analysis indicates that military intervention against a Crush swarm of this magnitude would require the combined forces of at least 12 member species. The casualties would be catastrophic. Telleris felt his hope cracking. We are not asking you to sacrifice yourselves. We are asking for help. Any help, weapons, shields, evacuation support, anything. The Quarian delegate, a massive being with scales that shifted through different colors, rumbled his response. The Quarian Empire has studied the Crush extensively. They adapt to energy weapons within hours. They consume physical barriers for sustenance. They reproduce faster than they can be killed. Every species that has fought them directly has suffered losses that took generations to recover from. We cannot justify such risk. My people will be extinct in 40 days. Terrorists pleaded, abandoning the formal speech he had prepared. We have given everything to this union. We fed your colonies when famine struck the outer rim. We shared our agricultural secrets with 17 species. We asked for nothing in return. Now we ask for our lives, and you speak of justification. The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. Several representatives shifted in their seats. A few looked genuinely pained by the situation, but none spoke up with offers of aid. The Vexel Confederacy representative, speaking through translator device, since their species communicated through bioluminescent Patterns delivered the final blow. The Union Council recognizes the Velna's contributions to galactic society. However, the preservation of multiple species must take precedence over one. We propose a formal evacuation effort. We can save perhaps 500,000 of your people before the swarm makes further extraction impossible. It is the most practical solution. Terrorists felt the words like physical blows. 500,000 from 3 million. His wife would die. His children would die. His entire civilization, everything the Velna had built over 10,000 years, would be erased from existence because it was not practical to save them. Is there no one? Taurus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Now, no one in this entire Union who will stand with us. The silence that followed was his answer. The message that changed everything. General Marcus Way sat in his office aboard the Earth Defense Station. Harmony, staring at the holographic display of the Velna system. At 52 years old, Marcus had seen more combat than most soldiers would experience in 3 lifetimes. He had fought in the water wars of Earth, led peacekeeping missions during the African Coalition conflicts, and commanded humanity's first successful defense against pirate raids. In the outer solar system, his face bore the scars of someone who had learned early that the universe was not kind to the unprepared. Earth had joined the Galactic Union only 3 years ago. Humanity was still considered primitive by galactic standards, barely qualifying for membership. Their technology was crude, their understanding of advanced physics limited, and their military capabilities were viewed as quaint by species who had been traveling the stars for millennia. But Marcus had learned something during his decades of service. Advanced technology meant nothing if he did not have the will to use it. And humanity had something most galactic species had lost over their peaceful centuries. They remembered what it meant to fight for survival. Sir, we've received the Velna distress transmission, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chin reported, entering his office with a tablet displaying the data. It's been broadcasting on all frequencies for 16 hours. The Galactic Union has officially classified it as a Category 5 extinction event and recommended evacuation of minimal viable population. Marcus watched Taurus plea for the 3rd time. He saw the desperation, the disbelief, the moment when hope died in the ambassador's eyes. He had seen that look before on Earth when nations turned away from genocides because intervention was too costly, too complicated, too risky. What's our current military strength in that sector? Marcus asked. Sir looked confused. Sir, we don't have any assets near Velna space. Our closest battle group is 40 light-years away, and we'd need authorization from Earth Command before deploying. Besides, the Union has already declared this a non-intervention scenario. I didn't ask about authorization, Commander. I asked about our capabilities. Sarah consulted her tablet. Battle Group 7 under Admiral Catherine Torres, 3 carriers, 12 destroyers, 8 frigates, and full marine complement, approximately 15,000 personnel total. Sir, you're not seriously considering? Give me a direct line to Admiral Torres in Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Over the next 6 hours, Marcus engaged in the most important military briefing of his career. Earth Command was divided. Some argued that humanity could not afford to antagonize the Galactic Union so early in their membership. Others pointed out that Earth's admission to the Union had been conditional on humanity's demonstrated willingness to defend. Others, a trait the peaceful galactic species found both fascinating and useful. General Patricia Hamilton, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces, made the final decision. We didn't claw our way up from tribalism, survive 2 world wars, and unite our planet just to watch from the sidelines when people are being slaughtered. If the galaxy wants to judge us for saving lives, let them judge. Marcus, you have full authorization. Save as many as you can. Marcus felt something settle in his chest. This was why he had stayed in service even after the wars ended. This was what humanity was supposed to be. Admiral Torres, this is General Way. You are to proceed immediately to the Velna system. Rules of engagement are simple. Anything attacking the Velna is hostile. Anything between you and the Velna is an obstacle. Use whatever force necessary to complete the mission. Admiral Catherine Torres, a career officer who had commanded Earth's first deep space fleet, responded without hesitation. Understood, General. Battle Group 7 is jumping in 90 minutes. We'll show these bugs what a death world species looks like when you threaten innocent people. When Deathworlders answer the call, the Velna home world of Verdalis was dying. From orbit, the planet looked diseased. Massive sections of the once green continents were now gray and brown, consumed by the crash swarm. The insects moved in waves visible even from space, devouring forests, cities, and everything in their path. Tellerus stood in the Planetary Defense Center, watching the tactical displays with numb acceptance. His people had perhaps 30 days before the swarm consumed the last surviving population centers. Ambassador, we're detecting multiple fleet signatures entering the system, the defense coordinator announced, confusion in his voice. They're not crashed there. I don't recognize the configuration. Wait, translating. Identification now. They're identifying as Earth Defense Forces Battle Group 7. Taurus felt his heart skip. The humans, the species that had only joined the Union 3 years ago, the primitive Deathworlders who still fought wars on their own planet. Are you certain? Yes, sir. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Message reads, this is Admiral Catherine Torres of the Earth Defense Forces. We received your distress call. The Galactic Union may have abandoned you, but humanity does not leave people to die. We're here to fight. Where do you need us? For the first time in 18 days, Tolerus felt something other than despair. You felt hope. When others fight. First contact with hope. Admiral Catherine Torres stood on the bridge of the EDS Valiant, her flagship carrier, watching the tactical display of Verdalis with practiced assessment. At 48 years old, Catherine had earned her position through competence and courage, not politics. She had commanded Earth's first contact with the century. Colonists negotiated trade agreements with 3 alien species, and now she was about to remind the galaxy why death world species were called that for a reason. Status report, she commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge. Activity. Commander James Park responded immediately. All ships have completed jump sequence and are in formation. Scanning shows massive crash concentration on the primary continent. Estimated population 70 million. Individual organisms. They're consuming everything organic at approximately 15 km per hour. Velna population centers are fortified underground, but defenses are failing. They have maybe 36 hours before total collapse. Catherine studied the swarm patterns. The crash moved like a living carpet across the planet. Surface, consuming, reproducing, expanding. Traditional warfare would be useless against such numbers. Energy weapons would kill thousands, but millions more would adapt and continue. Physical barriers would simply be eaten. The galactic species were right about one thing: fighting the crash conventionally was suicide. Good thing humans rarely fought conventionally. Open a channel to Ambassador Terrace, Catherine ordered, and get me Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos. Tell her to prep her Marines for immediate planetary deployment. Terrace appeared on the view screen, his forearms gesturing frantically as he spoke from the Planetary Defense Center. Admiral Torres, I cannot express our gratitude for your arrival, but you must understand what you face. The crash cannot be reasoned with. They adapt to all known weapons, and their numbers are overwhelming. The Union calculated that 12 species would be needed to fight them. With acceptable losses, you have arrived with one. Catherine smiled, but it was not a comforting expression. Ambassador, humanity spent 200,000 years evolving on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to hunt creatures 10 times our size with nothing but sharp rocks and persistence. We survived ice, ages, plagues, and each other. We did not become the dominant species on Earth by giving up when the odds were bad. Now, I need tactical information. Where are your people concentrated? Terrace quickly transmitted coordinates for the 3 remaining Velna strongholds, each protected by failing energy shields and dwindling defensive systems. The largest shelter holds 1 million people in the Karvesh Valley. The shields will fail within 18 hours. Once the crash breached the barriers, it will be a massacre. Then we have 18 hours to teach these bugs why you don't threaten species under human protection. Catherine responded, how deep underground are your shelters? The Karvesh shelter extends 2 km below the surface. Why? Catherine's smile widened. Because we're going to use their appetite against them. Commander Park, signal all ships. Operation Scorched Earth is approved. Let's introduce the crash to human innovation. The Battle of Karvesh Valley. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had served in more combat zones than she could count. She had fought insurgents in the Amazon, led boarding actions against pirate vessels in the asteroid belt, and trained countless Marines in the art of warfare. At 39 years old, she was considered one of Earth's finest tactical commanders. Now, as her drop ship descended through Verdalis's atmosphere with 500 Marines, she was about to face an enemy unlike anything she had encountered before. Listen up. Maria addressed her troops over the comm system. The Crush are not soldiers. They're not thinking opponents. They're biological machines programmed to consume and reproduce. That means they'll be predictable. They'll come straight at food sources without strategy or deception. We're going to use that against them. The drop ships landed 3 km from the Karvesh Valley shelter, well outside the Crush swarms. Immediate advance. Maria watched through her helmet display as the gray mass of insects flowed across the landscape like a living tsunami. Each crash was roughly the size of a large dog with mandibles that could tear through metal, and a reproductive cycle that spawned a 100 offspring from each adult that consumed enough biomass. Phase 1 established the barrier line. Maria commanded. Her Marines moved with practiced efficiency, deploying what appeared to be simple metal posts in a semicircle around the valley approach. Each post was actually a sophisticated dispersion unit, containing humanity's answer to the crush problem. The Galactic Union had tried energy weapons and physical barriers. Humans had decided to try chemistry. All units fall back to secondary positions. Activate the disperse. On my mark. Maria watched as the leading edge of the crush swarm encountered the barrier line. The insects paused briefly, their primitive sensory organs detecting the metal, then surged forward to consume it. Now the posts exploded outward, not with fire or energy, but with a fine mist that settled across the swarm like morning dew. For 5 seconds nothing happened. Then the crush began to die. The compound was humanity's own creation, developed specifically for this mission. During the 40-hour journey to Verdalis, it was a combination of synthetic pheromones that triggered cannibalistic behavior in insect species and a fast-acting neurotoxin derived from Earth's most poisonous organisms. The crush had never encountered anything like it, because no galactic species thought to weaponize biology the way humans did. The swarm turned on itself. Millions of crash began attacking and consuming each other in a frenzy of confused aggression. The great tide that had been advancing unstoppably toward the shelter collapsed into chaos as the insects devoured their own kind. Chemical warfare, Maria muttered with satisfaction. Welcome to fighting a Deathworld species. But the crush were numerous beyond comprehension. Even as millions died from the chemical attack, millions more continued advancing from other directions. Maria had bought time, but not victory. Admiral Tor's Phase 1 successful, requesting Phase 2 authorization. Catherine's voice came through clearly. Authorized, Colonel. Let's show them what orbital bombardment looks like when you're not worried about collateral damage. Fire from the heavens. In orbit, the Earth Defense Forces fleet moved into attack formation. The Velna watched from their shelters in awe and terror as human warships positioned themselves above the swarm concentrations. What happened next would be discussed in galactic militarities for generations. The EDS Valiant and her sister carriers deployed their full payload of kinetic strike weapons. These were not sophisticated energy beams or exotic particle weapons. They were simply extremely dense metal rods accelerated to tremendous velocity and aimed at precise coordinates. Humanity called them rods from God. First impact struck the densest crush concentrations with the force of small nuclear weapons. The kinetic energy alone vaporized millions of insects, instantly creating shock waves that pulverized millions more. The ground itself liquefied under the impacts, creating killing zones hundreds of meters across. But the humans were not finished. The destroyers and frigates added their own weapons to the bombardment, incendiary munitions that burned at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees, cluster bombs that scattered smaller explosives across square kiln, thermobaric weapons that consumed all oxygen in massive radiuses, suffocating entire swarm sections. The Velna had never witnessed warfare on this scale. The galactic species fought with precision and efficiency, carefully calculated strikes designed to minimize Resource expenditure, humans fought with. Overwhelming brutal violence designed to eliminate threats completely. Command. Vesh, the Velna military coordinator, watched the orbital bombardment with something approaching religious awe. They're not trying to push the swarm back, they're trying to exterminate it. Completely. Taller nodded slowly. The galaxy has forgotten what it means to fight for survival. Humans remember. They remember it in their bones. The bombardment continued for 3 hours. By the time Catherine ordered a ceasefire, the crash swarm had been reduced by 60%. The remaining insects were scattered, disorganized, and no longer posed an immediate threat to the shelters. All Marine units begin ground sweep operations. Catherine commanded. I want every remaining bug within 50 km of those shelters eliminated. No mercy, no prisoners. Complete eradication. Cost of being a Deathworlder. Maria led her Marines through the devastated landscape, hunting the remaining crash. With methodical efficiency, her soldiers moved in coordinated teams, using flamethrowers, explosives, and good old-fashioned violence to eliminate every insect they encountered. It was brutal work, but Marines from Earth had learned long ago that some enemies did not deserve restraint. Private Jackson Chin, a 23-year-old from the Shanghai Defense Forces, paused during the sweep to help a group of civilians who had emerged from a damaged bunker. The Veln stared at him with their large eyes, clearly frightened by his armor and weapons. It's okay, Jackson said, gently removing his helmet to show his human face. We're here to help. Where are the rest of your people? The Velna elder gestured toward the underground shelter. 20 families. We thought we would die here. The Union told us no one would come. Why did you come? You do not know us. We cannot repay you. Jackson smiled. On Earth we have a saying, we leave no one behind. That does not just mean our own people. That means anyone who needs help. That's what makes us human. The sweep operations continued for 2 more days. Marines cleared every tunnel, every structure, every possible hiding place where Crush might regroup. Medical teams established field hospitals to treat injured Velna. Engineering crews began repairing damaged infrastructure. Supply ships delivered food, water, and medical supplies to the population centers. Admiral Torres coordinated the entire operation from orbit, watching as her forces systematically eliminated the threat and began the reconstruction process. On the 3rd day, she received a transmission from the Galactic Union Council. The Altheran representative appeared on her view screen, his crystalline form pulsing with what might have been agitation. Admiral Torres, the Union Council demands an explanation for your unauthorized military intervention. In the Velna system, you have violated established protocols and engaged warfare without proper diplomatic clearance. Catherine listened patiently, then responded with perfect calm. Earth Defense Forces responded to a distress call from a species facing extinction. We employed necessary force to eliminate the threat and protect civilian populations. If the Union has issues with our methods, I suggest you file a formal complaint. In the meantime, we'll be staying in orbit until we're confident the Velna are secure. This is unacceptable. You cannot simply decide to wage war wherever you please. We did not wage war, Catherine corrected, her voice hardening. We performed a rescue operation. War implies 2 sides fighting. What we did was extermination of a plague that was consuming an entire civilization. If the Union had done its job and protected its own members, we would not have needed to intervene. The transmission ended. Abruptly, Catherine smiled slightly. She had just made Earth some powerful enemies in the galactic political arena. She had also saved 3 million lives. It was an acceptable trade, a new understanding. 1 week after the battle, Terra stood in the reconstructed plaza of Carve's Valley, addressing his people and the human forces who had saved them. The damage was still visible everywhere, but the crash were gone, completely eradicated from Verdalis. Human scientists had even developed a planetary defense system using modified pheromone dispersers that would prevent any future crush incursions. For 600 years, the Galactic Union has maintained peace through calculation and caution. Taller spoke, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. They measure costs and benefits, they weigh risks and rewards. They debate and form committees while people die. Humanity has taught us something the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes the right thing to do is not the practical thing. Sometimes you fight because it is right, not because it is profitable. Catherine Torres stood beside him along with Maria Santos and selected representatives from the rescue forces. The Velna had insisted on honoring them publicly despite human protests that they were just doing their duty. The humans come from a death world, Tolerus continued, a planet where survival meant fighting every day against impossible odds. They evolved not through peace but through struggle, and they have brought that spirit with them to the stars. Today the Velna people pledge eternal friendship to humanity, what the Union abandoned. Earth protected, what the galaxy declared too costly to save humans. Deemed priceless, we will never forget. The Velna crowd erupted in their version of applause, a harmonic humming that created beautiful resonant frequencies. Human Marines stood at attention, many visibly moved by the display of gratitude. Later, as Catherine prepared to return to Earth, Tellerus approached her privately. Admiral, I must ask, why did you really come? Your species gains nothing from this. We have no strategic resources, no military strength, nothing to offer in trade. You risked your lives for strangers. Catherine considered the question carefully. Ambassador, on Earth we have a long and often dark history. We've committed terrible acts against each other, genocide, slavery, wars that killed millions, but we also learned from those mistakes. We learned that the measure of a civilization is not its technology or its power, it is whether it chooses to help those who cannot help themselves. The galaxy may see us as primitive Deathworlders, but we see ourselves as the species that finally learned that lesson. We came because you needed help, no other reason is necessary. Terrorist felt his eyes moistening, a Velna expression of deep emotion. Then perhaps the Deathworlders are not the primitive ones after all. Perhaps they are the only ones who truly understand what civilization means. As Battle Group 7 prepared to depart for Dallas, the Galactic Union Council convened another emergency session. This time the discussion was different. Humanity had demonstrated something that shook the foundations of galactic politics. They had proven that military action could be swift, decisive, and successful against threats the Union considered insurmountable. They had shown that calculations of cost and benefit were not the only factors that mattered. Some species were frightened by Earth's display of military power. Others were quietly grateful that someone was finally willing to act when action was needed. A few began to wonder if humanity's approach might be better than 600 years of cautious diplomacy. On Earth, General Marcus Way watched the reports of the rescue with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, not with conquest or domination, but with protection and sacrifice. They had shown that death world species could be something more than violent survivors. They could be defenders of those who could not defend themselves. The age of cautious calculation was ending. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the